Hi, I'm Shonda Ramsey, your host and fellow indie author. Are you overwhelmed at the thought of publishing your book by yourself? Has fear kept you frozen in place, unable to write even the first word of your book? Not knowing the steps you need to take shouldn't stop you from writing. That's why I've asked for help from some amazing industry professionals, published authors, and others who are in the same situation as you to share their knowledge on the self-publishing process. Welcome to Dear Indie Author, where we inspire creative independence in every writer. Hey everyone, it's Shonda, and I am here with my friend Belinda, and we are going to get started with these rapid fire icebreaker questions. Are you ready for those?
I am.
You are. All right, here we go. Do you believe in soulmates?
Oh, we went deep, like
We
really fast.
did.
You know, I think that they're probably, I think you can have a soulmate, but I think you can also have multiple soulmates depending on where you are in your life
hmm
because you change throughout your life.
Yeah.
So someone who may have been your soulmate when you were 16 may not be the same person if you were to meet them when you were 36, for
Oh,
instance.
I
So
love that. Yep.
So yeah, I think you can have a soulmate, but I think it's totally situational and contextual to where you are.
Awesome. I love that. This is my favorite question to ask romance writers, by the way. So all romance writers get this question first.
Oh,
What is the last song you listened to?
the last song I listened to, oh, I was grocery shopping and the song, in the store was Christmas Vacation.
Nice. Do you like spring or summer better?
Mm, I think I like spring better just because I do not enjoy sweating.
Mm, yeah, it's not as hot. That's funny. What is a place you most wish to travel to?
Jane Austen's house.
Hmm. Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be really awesome. Do you prefer a night in or a night out?
A night in.
Mm, yeah. Here's another tough one for you. Does love at first sight exist?
So this is kind of funny because I distinctly remember the night I met Mr. Husband, my husband.
hmm
We like were friends for 2 years, but like the moment like the first time I ever saw him, it's like very crystal clear a core memory for me.
hmm
Um, I remember like going home that night and being like, "Mom, I met this guy and he had like this really sweet smile." So I think you can have love at first sight, but that doesn't mean you have to act upon it.
Mm, I like that. That's smart.
Mhm.
That's good. That's really good. I like that. I never really thought of it that way, but I know what you're talking about. When I met my husband, the same thing. It's a very distinct core memory, and I remember telling my best friend that I was going to marry him someday.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I think I've been hanging out with him for like 3 months and I like turned to like a coworker, is like, I'm gonna marry him someday. And he's like, you're not even dating him yet.
Right?
Well,
When you know,
I
you
don't know.
know.
Yeah, when you know, you know.
That's funny. What is your favorite snack?
Ooh. Um, it depends on what I'm doing, but like my favorite mindless snack would be Twizzlers.
Mm,
Um, but I am like a salty sweet sort of person. So I love like the caramel cheddar popcorn mix.
hmm Yeah,
Mhm.
that's really good. All three at once.
Yeah, right?
What makes you hopeful?
Ooh, what makes me hopeful? My kids.
Hmm, I
Yeah.
like that. The younger generation, always full of hope.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Do you like dawn or dusk better?
Dusk.
hmm When the stars are first coming out.
Yeah. It's kind of
Yeah.
like orangey purpley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is your favorite place to write?
I do love writing in my little home library cocoon that I've built.
Yeah.
Um, but otherwise, I am constantly seeking a new cozy spot to write in.
Quiet and
So if it's a
cozy.
coffee shop, if it's a library,
Mm,
anything, a tea shop, um, I write cozy stuff, so I want to
yeah.
feel cozy as I'm writing it.
Mm. That's good. What motivates you the most?
My anxiety.
Is that because of the deadlines?
Well, you know, and that's funny because like I don't give myself deadlines. Like,
Yeah.
but so I think well, okay, so my facetious answer is my anxiety, but like I do think that I just have this like compulsion to create things.
Hmm.
And so you can tell when I haven't made something in a while because I get really cranky.
Hmm.
And so I think that part of that motivation is like to be known and heard and seen.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think that may be true for maybe a lot of creatives.
Hmm.
We have very rich inner worlds. So I think part of my motivation is actually like I'm trying to unpack what's happening in my own brain. So, hey,
Yeah.
let's do the thing.
All the things that you see and think of. Yeah.
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 Describe your writing style in one word.
Can it be one name?
Sure.
Jane Austen.
That works.
Yeah.
Well, welcome.
Otherwise, I'd probably say like cheeky.
Cheeky. Yeah, I like that too. Well, welcome again. Can you start by telling us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah. So, hi everybody. My name is Belinda Kroll. I, as I've sort of hinted, I write cozy fantasy romance, specifically in the Victorian era, which, depending on who you talk to, is historical, is Victorian, is gas lamp. So it all just depends on who you're talking to. Um, Based in Ohio, and have a house, family, work full time. So writing is not my full time gig. I don't want it to be my full time gig. Um, and I have recently just I've sort of expanded some of the things I'm doing with my writing though, and trying to make it more joyful. So yeah, that's probably a good start right there.
Yeah, that's great. Can you give us a brief overview of your books and the genres you write in?
Yes. So I kind of bounced around for a little bit. I have been self-publishing, technically speaking, since 2003.
Wow.
Um, but you wouldn't know it from my backlog because it takes me like 7 years, or it used to take me 7 years to write a book.
Hmm.
Um, so I have one genre, which is the one I'm leaning into. It's the cozy fantasy, specifically romantasy.
Hmm.
Um, sweet, no spice. It's just fun. And then I do have a couple of young adult, just straight historical fiction books.
Hmm.
The last April actually won an international award in 2017, so that was pretty
Wow.
exciting.
Yeah.
Uh, but then I immediately realized like I don't want to write young adult the rest of my life. So I was like, okay, well, thank you.
That's awesome.
Um, so yeah, so I do that, and then I do have my sort of nonfiction line, which is really just more journals for pantsers and discovery writers.
Hmm.
And then I have expanded my Hesitant Medium series, which is the series I'm focusing on now, the cozy gaslamp fantasy romance with ghosts, annoying ghosts. And I'm starting to illustrate them because I used to do that a lot and I miss it. So
Yeah. I like that. So, how did you develop the unique blend of cozy gas lamp romantasy?
It's so funny because technically, so I wrote Hunting Miss Trentwood back in 2010. We did not have words like cozy fantasy
Hmm.
or gaslamp or romantasy. These are all words that have come out in the last year or so.
Yeah.
But my first book for this series was published in 2010. And I had a really hard time finding my audience because I was saying things like whimsical gothic,
Mm.
like romantic mystery, although there's not a lot of mystery in it. It was a really hard niche to find. And then during quarantine, legends and lattes started getting real big.
Hmm.
And, everyone was talking about the vibes. And I was like, well, I'm all about the vibes. And my vibes are it's escapist, it's fun, there's low stakes. Um, I've always been obsessed with the Victorian era,
Hmm.
partially because of so many, one, fashion changes, two, a lot of civil rights changes happened
Hmm.
during that era. And we had a long way to go beyond that, but still a lot of things happened. Industrial Revolution. So a lot of stuff happened that during that time. And I just have always sort of dreamed that magic, there's like just like another magical world that we just can't get to.
Yeah.
Um, and so, growing up, I was watching things like Sailor Moon and Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Charmed, um, Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. I mean, just so many, so
Yeah.
many fantasy things were on TV, Beetlejuice,
Yeah.
and so I just was constantly, I think, diving into the fantasy world without realizing it. I love interpersonal dynamics. So one of the best ways to study interpersonal dynamics is in a romance. Um, so it all just kind of came together, It really, what happened, I think, was I've had all these elements. I've been writing with these elements, but now we finally have words for it so people can understand what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. That makes it easier for sure to be able to find your audience with the newer words and the rise too for indie authors, which is great. So you can start to find those who love what you write, which is pretty awesome. So you said that your books, if you could sum it up into one word, it would be a person, which is Jane Austen. So you also, I believe when you signed up, said that it has a vocabulary with modern sass. So can
Yes.
you tell us more about your inspiration for this unique style?
I think part of it is just it's me.
Hmm.
I've read Pride and Prejudice, I think 29 times. I probably have 29 different editions around my house somewhere. Um, I even bought the audiobook so that way if I'm having a rough day, I can just turn it on with my phone and listen to it on the commute home.
Hmm.
It's just like this very grounding, centralizing thing for me. And I think because I've read Pride and Prejudice so often, my writing style comes out very Jane Austen-esque.
Hmm.
And that's usually the thing I get told the most of like, I have never read a modern author like you. And I'm like, that's probably because half my brain is Jane Austen now from how
Hmm.
many times I've just absorbed this story.
Yeah.
And I just love her twinkling dialogue and it's like sparkling and I love her. And I'm not even as deep as Jane. She often has commentary, social commentary that's immediately below the surface. I don't always go to the commentary level, but I think that is a huge contributor to my style. And then the other half of that with the modern sass is just, I'm writing stories about Victorian women who can speak to ghosts and wish
Mhm.
they couldn't,
Yeah.
and the sweet men who love them. And so if you are willing to suspend your disbelief that we can chat with ghosts, then we can also suspend disbelief and say these Victorian women can be pretty modern and can be really sassy
Mhm.
and you can see yourself in them.
Yeah.
So I think it was an accidental thing. I think it's just something that honed over time as I kept writing. My, a couple of my friends they had picked up my book and they were like, I see you in this. How do I see you in this? And I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm not Mary at all. And they're like, yeah, but like I could see you saying what Mary's saying. And I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Like there are pieces of me that get into all my heroines.
Yeah.
Just, not the whole thing.
That's pretty neat. I like that you do that. What motivated you to start writing and illustrating your own books?
Honestly, it was seeing other authors do it. I was following Hannah Sandvig and Irene Chow on Instagram, and their Instagram feeds were so pretty. And I was like, what? How are they doing this? And I finally was like going through their feeds and I realized they're making their own art, they're illustrating their own books. Why didn't I ever think to do that? I miss drawing so much. I had a whole comic book story that I had like that was my one of my senior projects in high school. So I think that was a big part of it was just seeing other people do it
Hmm.
and trying to figure out, okay, like what are the tools that I need to get that done? And how much work am I putting on my shoulders by doing this?
By doing all of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
By doing all the things, as I like to call
indeed.
it. I mean, when you're a creative who also does illustrations and design, it's kind of goes hand in hand. It's just
Yeah,
how it
and I
is.
like to think of it, it's like a creative outlet that doesn't take up space in my house.
Yeah.
because that's what always stopped me before with creating art. I used to create canvases of art,
Mhm.
you know, but I only have so much wall space.
Yeah.
And so, and I figured, you know, people aren't going to want my art as gifts. Maybe they would, I don't know, but you know, digital art doesn't take up any space.
Mm-mm. Not physical, just the digital kind,
Yeah. Yeah.
which you can always get more of.
Yes.
Yeah. You have a variety of interests from Korean dramas to dancing the Lindy Hop. How do these hobbies influence your writing and creative process?
So the Korean dramas definitely, there is a whole phase where a lot of the rom-coms in Korean dramas were ghost stories, and it was
Mm.
perfect. Like I was able to like, you know, write off half of my Netflix bill because I was only watching stories that helped me understand how other people think about ghosts and how
Hmm.
it can be funny, how it can be scary. So it was research for me.
Yeah.
I think too, because of where Korean dramas tend to stop when it comes to intimacy, that
Hmm.
also is research. You know, I stick to the no spice, or I actually heard someone the other day saying they should that we're the Spice Girls era. So, you know, I write baby spice stuff, not scary spice.
That's funny.
Um, so I think definitely Korean dramas have influenced me there. Lindy Hop, that is a creative outlet, but it's physical.
Hmm.
And, you know, when you're a writer, you're
Hmm.
often sitting in contorted, you know, like I'm sitting on a sofa and I'm all here and here's my laptop, like up in my lap. And
Yeah.
so and then you're doing it by yourself too. I mean, I have a writers group that I attend, but, you know, most of my sort of gestation for my stories happens in my brain when I'm alone or the middle of the night, something like that. So having the ability to go and social dance with people
Hmm.
and like socialize, get to be out and about, and then also just move my body. Lindy Hop especially is great for like lower back pain because so much of it is about holding your core and holding your own weight, and then knowing where your partner's weight is. So it's an excellent, I think, balance for my like long solitary, you know, solo social things that I'm doing. And then,
Yeah.
okay, let's get up, let's move, let's get 15,000 steps in one dance, you know,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
That's pretty neat. I also feel like dance is so free and you can just feel really free. And for me, anytime you do something that makes you feel free, it kind of releases that creativity block that you tend to get, which is really nice too.
For sure, 100%.
Can you tell us more about Brightbird Press and what inspired you to create bullet journal inspired stationery for creatives and caregivers?
Yeah. Mostly because I needed them myself. So Brightbird Press is technically I guess I'll call it my micro imprint, right?
Mhm.
I publish all my books under Brightbird Press. Um, I took like a 7 year break between writing books. We had bought a house, we had a couple kids, we had some elderly pets that passed away. So there was just a lot going on. And I didn't have the creativity to have characters in my head,
Mhm.
but I was constantly looking for a way to help me organize my thoughts in such a chaotic time.
Yeah.
And I was into bullet journaling. I was using it for work actually. And I think it's writer Carol who created it. And I started making my own bullet journals, but then focusing on just writing and having like a collection for here are some you know, here are some comp comp titles. Here's are some, you know, covers that I want to keep in mind. And then I had a writer friend who said, "Hey, that's really cool. Where'd you get that?" And it's like, "Well, I made it." And then next thing I knew, I was hand creating bullet journals for other people. I'd buy a journal for them. I'd write out all the page numbers. I'd write out collections and have an index for them.
Mhm.
And then I thought, this is not sustainable. I'm going to get carpal tunnel doing this for everybody. And you know, I used to be on the high school newspaper. I knew how to use InDesign. So I translated it into a journal. And again, the words matter. So for a long time, I didn't know how to say what I was doing because they're undated,
Mm-hmm.
they're they're empty, but they also are so rich because they're full of, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And also the back half is like free reign scribbles,
Mm-hmm.
just have the space you need. So my whole goal is, if you're writing at all, if you're thinking about your writing at all, that's a win because there's a lot going on in everyone's lives. And I don't, the thing that I dislike about most journals in the store is they're dated.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you miss a couple days, now you have this unnecessary guilt of like, oh no, I missed a couple days and I'm never going to get those days back. It's like, well, you were doing other things. That's
Yeah.
fine. So I am 100% like undated journal girl. I don't want the journal to punish you. I want the journal to be there ready for you when you're ready for it.
Yeah.
So that's really where all that came from. And then I made different variations. I had one that was very much focused on like a monthly challenge. So there's different spreads for that one. Um, the caregiver one, I couldn't find a newborn baby log that I liked. So I made my own. Friends wanted to know where I got it. All right, let's just throw it up on the Etsy store.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really how a lot of it happened. And it was great because it was still a creative outlet, but I didn't have to think of backstory and plot and
Right.
what's the next thing. Just it was a much more low key sort
Mm-hmm.
of creativity, which I think got me through quarantine for sure, got me through, the first 3 years of being a mom.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of just, I'm just gonna make journals and ship them out to people in some pretty tissue paper and colorful bags, and it's like I'm sending care packages to writer friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit of love. I like that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you took a multi-year break from writing. What prompted you to return, and how has your approach to writing changed since then?
Oh, that's such a good question. The writing came back to me in the middle of the night as I was taking care of my infant.
Mm.
And I remember looking down at her thinking, one day she's going to look at me and wonder what what else did mom do?
Mm.
You know, was she just mom? And that's never been my thing.
Yeah.
I've always been very encouraging of people to find their thing and stick with it even when it's hard. So I'm helping my baby in the middle of the night and this character pops into my head, fully formed, and she's like this black ghostbuster in Victorian England, like kicking ghost butt. Like she does like a tuck roll thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I watched a little movie in my head. I just thought, oh my God, who is she? I was like, I might be hallucinating because it's 3 a.m. and I haven't had much sleep and
Yeah.
the baby.
That's
But I
funny.
went with it.
Yeah.
And so what happened was I had wanted to make uh Haunting Miss Trentwood into a series. I didn't know how to do it
Mm.
because at the time I was reading fantasy series. I hadn't been reading romance series, and I forgot that romance series have two flavors: the connected story across the whole series of books and the standalones that maybe they're just in the same universe or something, same
Yeah.
town. And once I realized, like, wait a minute, like at the end of the one book, the one guy does not get picked. And maybe he can have a redeeming arc because he's kind of spineless.
Yeah.
And maybe the girl so it became a bunch of what ifs,
Yeah.
and it just came so fully formed. I do have more of a structure. I still would say I'm a pantser,
Mm-hmm.
but I do at least have the beats in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we're going to talk later about some tools that we like to use.
Yeah.
But there are just like one or two things that every time I start a new story or start thinking about a new story, I pull this book out and I'm like, well, how would I accomplish this beat? Because it's almost like a mile marker in the
Yeah.
story. So I want to make sure that everyone's following with me. And has been a huge change because now I feel like I can pick the story up again and keep going, even if it's been a couple days because I'm doing family stuff or work stuff.
Yeah. That's really good. I like that. I like that it came to you like that in the middle of the night too. So that's pretty inspirational. That's really neat. What does your typical writing process look like from initial idea to finished manuscript?
Initial idea is usually I have, like I was just saying, there's a particular scene that pops into my head. It's usually two characters, usually the hero and the heroine. They're having some sort of witty back and forth. And then I spend the rest of the time trying to figure out how did we get there.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, I don't write in order. I write as the scenes come to me, and then I'm patchworking everything together. I have a dedicated journal, and that journal does have a legend. So I know that I've copied something from the journal into the computer by putting a little red check mark. If it's a
Mm-hmm.
question mark, that means I know I have to answer that question at some point in the story. If it's an exclamation point, it's like, oh, I surprised myself, so that's
Yeah.
kind of cool. Um, so I do have a dedicated journal, and I try to keep that with me. So that way, no matter where I am, I have a space to jot stuff down, but I also will use, notes on my phone. Um, Everything goes into a Word doc.
Mm-hmm.
I will use, I have like a specific formatting for like heading 4, which I only use heading 4 to say fill the gap.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Yeah.
formatting of heading 4 is like bold, 18 point, yellow highlighter back.
Yeah.
So then as I look through the outline of the file, I can figure out where am I supposed to fill the gap, because then I see like here are all the gaps I need to fill.
Yeah.
And then if I get stuck, because usually I write in the beginning, I get somewhere close to the middle, and then I usually get really stuck. So then I will write the end, and then
Mm.
I'll write backwards. If this was the ending, how did we get there? Well, if that's what happened, how did we get there? And I just keep asking,
Yeah.
well, how did we
Back.
until all of a sudden the two sides come together, print it all out, attack it with the red pen, go back through. I'll use ProWritingAid to catch the simple errors,
Yeah.
and then I send my story on to my editor. And she usually does 2 or 3 rounds. We do 2 or 3 rounds together. In the meantime, while I'm waiting for the edits to come through, I'm designing the cover.
Mm-hmm.
I'm, finalizing the other things, the ISBN assignment, and getting a listing up on my Shopify,
Mm-hmm.
and, starting to get drafts ready across the different platforms. So that way, when the story is done, it's a matter of just plop it and go. Once I have the final story, I drop it into Atticus. I do
Mm-hmm.
all of my book interior formatting using that tool. And I prefer that, even though I bought a Mac thinking I was going to use Vellum,
Mm-hmm.
but then I realized it's a client software. And I need the flexibility that if I want to edit something, change something, fix something, I want to be able to log into any computer, make that change, download the file, upload it again, be good to go.
Yeah.
I really dislike the idea of I need to be at my station to get
Yeah.
things done.
Yeah.
So I use Atticus, I use Canva for my book covers. Is a combination of my art and then simple elements that layer. Like this book, I think has 25 layers in
Mm-hmm.
it. You wouldn't know it by looking at it, but
Yeah.
all those things come together to make it,
One. Mm-hmm.
the one design.
Nice.
Yeah, and then I feel like from there it's uploading everything, hoping, I didn't have any last minute typos, and
Which always happens.
which always happens. And, I'll tell my newsletter, tell my Patreon, tell people on social media,
Mhm.
and, and that's it. Try to let it live and breathe from
Mm.
there.
Yep, and here it is. I love that.
Yeah.
You illustrate your own books and design your interiors and covers, like you said. So, how do you balance the creative aspects of writing and illustration? Is it simply just waiting until it goes into the editing process so that you can then kind of free yourself up to do that? Is that how you do that, or is
I
there
feel like
another?
I feel like I'm still figuring out my method.
Hmm.
So I I've been using Kickstarter to help with my illustrated books, to figure out, one, is there even an audience for this? Like, do people
Hmm.
like my art? So I did Haunting Miss Trentwood as a Kickstarter. That book I'd written in 2010. So the story was done. I just had to make the pictures that I always had in my head. There were certain scenes that always stuck out to me.
Yeah.
So that was pretty straightforward. The book had been done for a while. I just got to make the pictures and reformat stuff. With A Spirited Engagement, because I knew I wanted to illustrate it, there were moments where I was writing a scene because I knew I wanted to draw the scene,
Mm.
which feels kind of chicken and egg. Um, and then it was a little frustrating when I was like, oh, I'm not a good enough artist to actually make the scene that's in my head on the paper. So then you're, editing and trying to figure things out. But I feel like now I think that is kind of becoming more of my methodology, maybe, is that as I'm writing the story, I'm looking for where would this be a good scene to illustrate.
Hmm.
So as I'm going, and then also while I'm writing the story, I'm finding reference pictures.
Mm.
So that way, yes, when I send it to my editor, I can deep dive into making the images.
Hmm.
Um, and I usually start pen and paper, put it into my iPad, use Procreate to do the final rendering and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I feel like my creativity has seasons, and the writing season is sort of long and tenuous and like a lot of thinking. And then right about the time I'm about to get burned out on the story, I send it to my editor, and then I refresh myself with the story because now I'm drawing the characters and I'm drawing, and so I'm falling back in love with them from a completely different angle. So then
Yeah.
by the time the story comes back, it's like, oh, right, okay, yeah. Like I've been living with them, but I've not been living with the words. So
Mm.
now I feel like that has really helped with my editing.
That's good. I like that. That's really good. Um, how do you stay motivated and find joy in writing, especially considering it's your side hustle and not your full-time job?
I think that's a big part of it, is not allowing it to be my full-time job.
Mm.
I do have a fairly creative job at work. So there is some of that already taken care of. Um, but it's sometimes motivation is really difficult, It's
Mhm.
you have you've got a lot going on in your life. You'd love to just sit down and write, but you gotta do chores around the house. You gotta make sure people are fed. You gotta make, like there's a lot. And there was for a while there, I was trying to burn the candle at both ends, doing work, doing family stuff, and then I would start writing at 10 p.m. to like
Mm.
midnight.
Yeah.
And midnight is then I get like my second wind, and I'm up till 2,
Oh.
you know, on a work night. So that really drained me, and I had to completely recalibrate and be like, this is not working. And if I want to keep doing this, I have to make it sustainable for me as a system. And that's actually
Yeah.
one of the criteria. If I'm not having fun, it doesn't belong in this system because
Mhm.
I'm already doing so much and I put so much of my energy into this, even as a side hustle,
Yeah.
that if I'm doing something and it's not fun, then it's just not worth my investment. It's not
Mm.
worth my time.
Yeah.
Because you have to learn how to say no in order to figure out where you can put more energy into the yes.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. And sometimes too, you end up saying no to other things too that you don't think that you would say no because if it's something that you really want to do, there's always that give and take. Like you got to have balance and everything. And I get that. I can feel that for sure. Um,
Mhm.
for aspiring authors who might feel overwhelmed, what advice would you give them about starting with writing?
I'm a little rebellious sometimes. And so I feel like there's a part of me that's like, okay, like I know everyone's saying you have to do it this way, but you really don't.
Yeah.
You really don't. Whatever way that you're starting to write, that's the right way for you
Hmm.
to write.
Yeah.
So don't worry about it. It's the first draft.
Yeah.
It's draft zero. I do a draft zero because I give myself permission to be terrible.
Yeah. I like that
And
too.
then that first printout attacking with the red pen, that's draft one because I've actually sat down and been super intentional about the whole thing.
Yeah.
It is totally fine to write out of order. It's totally fine to write from the back to the front. It's fine to write completely in order, like as if it were a movie. They're all fine.
Yeah.
We all have our own brains. We have our different contexts. So in the same way that like two violin players won't actually play the same, even though they're trained the same, they still have their own personality and flavor to it.
Hmm.
I feel like it's the same thing with writers. yes, you'll be trained and you'll have rules and guidelines, but you'll also learn when you can break them. But you're not going to learn that if you don't start putting pen to paper
Yeah.
and exercise that muscle.
That's awesome. I like that. I think too, to kind of piggyback on that, that this is where the whole comparison thing starts too. When you hear
Mm.
so many people say, well, you have to do it this way, and then this way, it's like, I'm with you. I say the same thing. No, you have to find what works for you. We are all different. And so what works for me is not going to work for you, and probably vice versa. Like, for instance, pantsing. I wanted to be a pantser so bad. I was determined that that was how I wrote. And then I discovered plotting, and I'm like, yep, nope, I'm a plotter. So it's just, you just got to find what works for you. And the only way you're going to find it is by trial and error. So I never would have guessed that plotting to the extent that I do is really what makes me a successful writer, as opposed to trying to discover the whole thing as it's coming. Now, I do give myself room for discovery in the
Yeah.
story, but I have to have a plot.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's my
Well,
direction. It's like my roadmap.
that's exactly because if I know too much of the story, I lose interest.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's terrible. I mean, I know I'm supposed to be writing book three, but I started dreaming up book four, and I was like, wait a minute, I haven't finished book three. You have to stop. You have to finish book three.
Yeah.
Just because you know what's going to happen doesn't mean you're done.
Right. Right. That's
That's
funny.
kind of the danger for my brain of like, if I know too much, then like all the fun gets taken out.
I love that. What specific steps can writers take to find joy in writing, even if they don't want it to be their full-time job?
I think finding a community can
Mhm.
help, whether it's digital or in person. I think your reading is a huge input.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
if you're reading books that don't bring joy to you, you may not be writing books that bring joy to you. So you need to find the books that really speak to you, that resonate for whatever reason,
Hmm.
and figure out why you love those books, and then figure out how much of that can you bring into your own writing in your own way.
Mm.
That's what makes it fun, I think,
Yeah.
is you're not trying to be someone else, but you are getting inspired and taking moments
Hmm.
from life and whatever to really get a good, I don't know, to get your own mix. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Can you share some specific resources or tools that you find invaluable for writers, whether for brainstorming, writing, editing, or publishing?
For sure. So I mentioned earlier, there's a book that I use. It's called Romancing the Beat. It's
Hmm.
by, I think, Gwen Hayes. And I love it because it's super short,
Yep.
you know, and she has a cheat sheet at the back. So once you've read the book, you could just go to the back every single time once
Hmm.
you need it. I love that because, again, it kind of gives me my roadmap. It gives me here are the big rocks that have to be there,
Yeah.
and I can figure everything else out along the way.
Hmm.
So love that. I use Notion for my, I guess, story Bible.
Hmm.
So that's sort of it's like an online relational database in a way. In the same vein, it's like Airtable and a couple other things. They have been branching out more into a suite of things like calendars and whatever else. But it's nice because I can create a character and have that be an entity, and then I can say, well, this character is tagged and is actually in book one, two, and three, but their story is book two, right? So
Yeah.
they're going to have more things about book two tagged for them. So then I get this like little database in a way as I'm creating things. So I can then reference and be like, well, when did that thing happen? And were they even in that book? you know,
Mm. Yeah.
um, I mentioned Atticus. I use
Hmm.
Atticus for my formatting, gives you print and ebook. And I use Canva for my not only my book covers, but also my social media. If
Hmm.
you get the pro account, which is about the same amount as like one of the Adobe subscriptions, I think, a year. I can't remember which one it is, but the benefit of using Canva is you can schedule your social media posts, and you can have a content calendar, and they allow you to create your brand, and have so I can be really consistent on social media because I don't have to hunt for the fonts that I like to use, the colors that I like to use. They're all
Already
right
there.
there.
Mm-hmm.
So that has been invaluable, I think. And I'll stick with those. Probably those
Yeah,
is my tool.
those are great tools. Are there any upcoming projects or initiatives you're excited about sharing with the listeners?
I am working on book 3 of The Hesitant Mediums. It's called An Uncanny Bargain. And I'm super excited about it because it's going to be the ultimate force proximity. The tagline I have right now is 2 souls, 1 body. No problem.
That's interesting.
So there's going to be a lot of ridiculous moments, I think,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
story. But I'm drafting it, I'm finding reference photos so that way when I'm ready to start illustrating, I have that ready to go. I've already started drafting the Kickstarter campaign, even though I haven't, maybe at the time of releasing this episode, I may have just started rolling out the fulfillment of the Kickstarter campaign for a spirited engagement. But yeah, I think that, and then also just continuing to lean into direct sales and just figuring out, you know, how to really lean into my Shopify. I make a lot of extra things. Like I
Mhm.
have a whole handbook for, it's called Sir Hubert's Handbook for the Recently Haunted. And it's
Mm.
basically a spoof off of the Beetlejuice Handbook for the Recently Deceased.
Yeah.
So if you have a ghost problem, you can read my book. If you become a ghost, you can read the Beetlejuice book.
Right.
And you can only get that at my store, right? And I think that's the thing I love about the store. I can make the manual that they mention in the book.
Yeah.
I can do that.
Yeah. That's pretty
It's
cool.
my store. I can do whatever I want, you
Yeah.
know? So I can be as creative and silly and goofy as I want, and then people can stumble and find me and they'll think, gosh, there's a lot going on here.
Hmm. That's another beautiful thing about being an indie author. You can create your own products that kind of go with it. Your companion products is what I call
Yes.
those. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool. Where can my listeners find you?
So I am most active on Instagram. So that I'm there as Wordarella. So think Cinderella, but with words. That is also my website, wordarella.com. And that's my Shopify and a couple other things. Um, and if you just want the quick links, you can go to wordarella.com/links and you'll see all the things where to
Yeah.
find me on Amazon, that sort of stuff.
Awesome. That's a good way to do that. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
I know we covered a lot today.
We did. We did.
No, I mean, I think this has been excellent, and
Mhm.
just with all the things we have covered, and it's just I just wish we could all give ourselves a break,
Mhm.
like there's a
Yeah.
lot going on, and if you're not enjoying writing, it's okay, take a break. I took a 7-year break, but during all that time, I think the wheels were turning, the back burner was working.
Mhm.
So that when I was ready, when I had the capacity to be that flavor of creative again, it came out full force.
Yeah.
So again, like it may not be the right time right now. That doesn't mean it's never going to happen.
I like that. I'd love for you to share the letter you wrote to our audience.
Yes. All right, here we go. Dear indie author, it's okay to listen to all the podcasts, read all the articles, follow all the big names. Just know that they're talking about what worked for them at that time in that book industry climate. Pick and choose what resonates and build your own plan piece by piece. Experiment, fail early and often so you learn quickly, build resilience and trust in yourself. And at the end of the day, you have to decide what's right for you and your life. Good luck. You can do this. Belinda.
Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Shonda Ramsey. For the show notes and links, head over to shondaramsey.com. And don't forget to join in on the conversation on socials. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a show and write a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, always remember, every writer deserves to see their words in print.